Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I just always enjoy talking to you so much. You are just so fantastic, and you constantly deliver golden nugget after golden nugget. What is it about you?
There's no pressure in that. I don't know.
Well, tell the listeners what it is. What is it that you do?
Well, I use design thinking so I can use storytelling and brand strategy so help people market better to sell more. And the notion of design thinking is central to what I do because design thinking is another term for design thinking is human-centered design. And it simply means that you sincerely care about your audience, your ideal prospect, and you make a concerted effort to understand them, understand their narrative, understand the opportunities and challenges that they have in their world. That understanding is as important as understanding your intention in your business, because that is part of your business to understand the audience that you serve. That human-centered design brings that focus into alignment. And in so doing, it makes the stories that you tell about your founding, about your products, and about the services you provide more compelling and interesting as call to action to that audience because you know them.
Yeah. Do you find people miss the mark on that, especially the audience piece?
I think people have two reasons that they don't do that work. One, they think that you're talking about an ideal prospect. That means that I want to sell I live in Tucson, Arizona, so I want to sell to everybody in the southwestern United States. And when you tell me to pick one and do the work to know them, to know their narrative, to know their story, to know the struggles that they have and the successes that they have in their business, and then paint that with a very fine brush. People say, one, that's a lot of work. Do you really have to do that? I mean, because if I'm doing that, I'm not selling. So do I have to do that before I sell? Do I have to do that before I market? Do I have to do that before I even do my business plan? And the answer is you do that while you're doing your business plan. And we should be doing a business plan every quarter, not just every 5 years. We should always be dynamic and always in 2016, because of the dynamic nature of the way technology advances. I mean, Catch is going to die on May 4th. That's the Periscope that's been archiving video. There's somebody working on something in a workspace right now that's going to replace Catch that will be better, right? That's going to rival live streaming on Facebook. And that's Darwinism, right? Digital Darwinism is cannibalizing products today to make the better product tomorrow. And we could look at it two ways. That one, it's our responsibility to keep up, to know what's going on with the technology. I keep up with technology to know how technology is affecting the market that I serve and changing their world. Because if the technology is making it easier for my customer to do thus and so, then their narrative is changing. And when their narrative changes, I have to be in sync with their narrative, because with the stories that I'm telling about my brand and my value to them has to be consistent with where they are in the buyer's journey today. My empathy map, and an empathy map is a picture that simply shows who you're dealing with, what they deal with on a given day, where their pain is and where their gain is, right? What they think and feel. And if you haven't thought of your ideal prospect in this construct of empathy map, where you're using what you in your bubble, what you think they think and feel, and then validating that by going out and engaging them to validate that what you thought and felt about your ideal prospect and how they'll be changed after getting your product is something that you experience in this bubble. You and your team sit in the conference room and say, oh gosh, we've got it. Oh my George, we're going to be amazingly successful. We know them so well. And you do that without talking to them. But when you do go out and you talk to them and they say, well, we're all that, but we're this too. You say, oh, we hadn't thought of that. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you have a picture. And so the picture looks like this, and here's your product. And when they come together, it goes like that. If you don't do that work, your product might be here and you'll get some connection. But an empathy map and doing the work to understand how your ideal prospect thinks and feels helps you market better, sell better, tell more compelling and insightful stories that they respond to. That's an awfully long answer to a short question, but.
Oh, it was great. It was great. And I love the piece about empathy. I think empathy is so, so crucial. And I think it's so missing on so many levels. That's just my personal perspective of it. Do you see people missing the mark on that, or not even registering it?
In my construct, everything that we do. I took my dog to the dog run this morning, and she's 18 months old, so she's still a puppy. A boxer will be a puppy until she's 24, and I've got a brindle boxer. But on that walk, I was the leader. I have to be the pack leader, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if my dog's not responding to my leadership, right? If my intuition about what that dog's going to do in that next moment, supposed to be walking on my left side with her head not much beyond my knee, right? If I'm not leading her in the right way, she's going to be all over the place. She'll want to play. She'll want to do this. But when I walk with my dog, I want her there. I'm saying that to say that that's leadership. And that leadership role that I assume when I'm walking my dog is not different than a leadership role that I assume when I'm working with my ideal prospects, when I'm working with my wife, when I'm working with my children, right? Mm-hmm. Leadership is central to everything. And what makes leaders good leaders is really tuning in and nurturing their self-awareness so they have a highly tuned sense of empathy. So they have a highly tuned sense of intuition. All the intellectual stuff that we get through academia, we have to use that as well. But when you use all three of those together, you really become a powerful leader and you can accomplish more. And people, I think, don't invest in mindfulness enough to let that empathy and intuitive wellspring rise up to use it, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. We are so conditioned from preschool through university and all the degrees that we acquire. Graduate is making us work in that lane where we're working expressly with intellect. Mm-hmm. But Einstein, and some of the great thinkers on the planet have said that, empathy and intuition. Steve Jobs said the very same thing, that it was intuition and empathy that helped him be the great innovator that he was. Mm-hmm. The same thing with Einstein. And if we don't hear those words from those great thought leaders and download them and use them to help us ourselves accomplish more, we're missing a huge opportunity, I think. And I often say that the opportunity for each of us is to understand what makes us successful. And that's the intellectualization of it. But then we have to do the work. Mm-hmm. And I've fallen prey to that, where I say, I understand that there's value in that. And then that's the end. I don't do the work to bring that value into my world. And so I think, the brands that I work with, the business professionals and the brands that I work with, all already know that they say, Art talks a lot about doing the work, and I'm ready to do the work, because if I do the work, I think I will accomplish more. I want to be more self-aware. I want to have my intuition and empathy as tools that will fuel my creativity and innovation to help me stand out among the crowd. Because that self-awareness helps me become more me. Because when and I'll use an example. Tracy Goodwin is an amazing voice coach. She can teach you how to speak with authority. And I say to myself, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be great if I could just bring into my practice all the things that Tracy does in her practice? She's so successful. That's what I'm going to do. And I would be the black male version of Tracy Goodwin. And when I spoke, I would say the same things that you say. I wouldn't look like you, but I would sound like you. And sometimes I'd go to the podium and people would say, wow, that guy's amazing. But as soon as somebody that knows you sat in that audience, they would say, that's not original. That's Tracy, but that's not Tracy. So I'm not standing out. I'm a parrot saying what you say. And that's the same thing when people read Gary Vaynerchuk's book, and you hear them and they say the same thing that Gary Vaynerchuk says. Okay, that's great. I read the book as well. Tell me what you believe. Because until you tell me what you believe, you're not standing out. You're not standing in your own authority, right? So I can hear the value of what Tracy Goodwin brings to me to make me a better speaker. But when I relay that message to my audience over here, I have to mash it up with me, all of my stuff. And when it becomes me and I internalize what Tracy says, and I add what I believe about what Tracy says, and I add this extra little thing that I think makes for my audience what Tracy says even more valuable to them, because perhaps my audience is different than your audience and they need something more. So, but all of that requires that we work on ourselves. It requires that we work on ourselves before we work on Snapchat, right? Instead of taking Snapchat and say, okay, I'm going to take the next 6 hours, I'm going to get the Snapchat thing down, and take a few hours and get you together, get in alignment with what you are and who you are and what value you bring to the world and who you're going to give it to and how they're changed in the process. And that, Tracy, simply requires that we do the work.
I love that answer so much. And I want to talk more about that. I totally hear that. And I totally agree with that. And I use a term in my teaching, you got to make it your own.
Yeah.
I can't make you, I don't want you to sound like me. Sure, I can use my voice. You better believe it. That's all I can do. But I don't want you, but I'm not making a copy of me.
Yeah.
I'm going to teach you the steps and then you make it your own. You're going to do your version of it. And I love that. And I want to talk more about that, but I want to ask one more question about what you've said so far with relation to empathy and all of these things. How does vulnerability play into that?
Ooh.
Do we need, as leaders, as the Steve Jobs, as the employees, as the bosses, as the solopreneurs, do we need vulnerability?
That's a very interesting question, and I'll answer it the best way that I can. And this is kind of stream of consciousness response. You asked the question, and I was spinning the wheel trying to find what I was going to use to answer that with. And the first idea that came to mind is this: in 2016, in this new century, the third millennia, right? Mm-hmm. In this new century, a lot of thought leaders that I respect, the Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, and the list goes on. I'd have to Google these names because I read this article 5 or 6 years ago. And they all said that if women ruled the world, we would not be in the mess that we are today, because, women are from Venus and men are from Mars. Mm. And that statement alone, Venus and Mars, when you think about what the intention of those, the way we think of those two planets are, Mars is the god of war, and Venus is all about Venus, beauty and nurturing and the mystical and the magical. Mm-hmm. And that's my way of answering it. And so when I read that article, I was really interested in finding out how that notion from these thought leaders applied to business. Because we all know that the glass ceiling with women prevent it from being in boardrooms and being CEOs. But in recent history, in particular in this millennia, in this century, we've got women that are CEOs of Xerox and IBM and PepsiCo, and the list goes on. And the studies, the Forbes magazines and Harvard Business Review studies that have looked at women ascending to the pinnacle of leadership and how their style has helped those businesses change the culture, those studies have borne out the reality that what Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama were saying, that in the last century, if you were tall, man with broad shoulders, and could wear a handsome suit and tie, you could dominate the conversation, and you could walk around and say, look, I've got 9 votes and a stick. You've got 1 vote. You're going to do this because if you don't, that was 9-1 management style. I got 9 votes. You've got 1. I'm the leader. Mm-hmm. And a woman will be more vulnerable and more humble and want to have a conversation. Say, look, I'm the leader. Let's talk about it. So tell me about your perspective. And I think around the same time, I was discovering that, this is probably 8 years ago now, social media was in the fabric of the World Wide Web. Technologists like myself embraced it because we've been playing with technology for decades. We understood the technology behind the social media. Women embraced it because women nurture conversations better than men in the fabric of social media. So I'm saying all that to say that if we look at the social platforms that are available to us, and we look at the bar graph of who's more engaged in social media, the bar for women is taller than the bar for men. Mm-hmm. Men are here, women are here. Women are just wired for engagement. We look at leadership, and the studies have been made about women CEOs in Fortune 500 companies. Women create better cultures where people thrive. And the men that are embracing that style, softer style, are becoming more successful. So those thought leaders that said, if the world were governed by women who, long answer again to get to the vulnerability question, who approach problem solving in a more vulnerable way. It's not 9-1. I got the stick, I got 9 votes. Are you going to do it? There's a whole different approach. So the short answer is vulnerability is important because it opens the door to having conversations where you respect the other person enough to hear them. And I think that's humble, being humble and a little vulnerable. And being a little vulnerable says that I might have 9 votes in the equation, but I know that I am better, the collective, in bringing me innovative and creative ideas. I have to be open to hear those innovative and creative ideas because there's gold in them, Lar Hills. And if I think that I've got all the answers about creativity and innovation, I might be missing a huge opportunity to come up with something disruptive that changes the world.
That's such a great answer. It's such a great answer. And, I was curious just based on our conversation, but I was curious because just of even trends I see in my own business, I see the pendulum for me personally has swung to far many more male clients where I used to have female clients. And the majority of them are coming with the tone question. I think I'm repelling people. I think there's something in my tone. I think I'm too aggressive. I think I need to work on my voice. Yeah. So I think you're spot on. I think you're absolutely spot on. And I think the pendulum is swinging. But, vulnerability popped into my mind when you were talking about standing out and that parroting. And I'm curious to what your thought is, because I hear this come up a lot. Do you think people tend to jump on that bandwagon of parroting far too often, especially in social media? Oh, that's working for him. I'm going to be like him because he's successful. And even in picking platforms, oh, LinkedIn's working great for him, so I got to focus on LinkedIn. Well, your people aren't on LinkedIn, So that's kind of a double question. Are people parroting too much in the dream of success, and are they just throwing too much out there and jumping on too much following and not even being in the right place?
Yes. After all those long answers, I can answer that one with a simple. And I think it goes back to that notion of and so storytelling is I use design thinking, brand strategy, and storytelling as foundational to the work that I do. And design thinking is this paradigm where you first establish what is going on, and you think about what if I did these things about what's going on. And so what is a little stack. What if you have a tall stack, all the possibilities. Ideally, you get the team to talk about what is, and then you get the team to talk about what if and grow that stack of potential. And then from that stack of potential, what if, you get what wows. Oh my gosh, this wows. And then you select what works and you can bring into being. Design thinking was IDEO, a company in Silicon Valley, was using it to design great things. Then it was being used to do sustainability products, social responsibility solutions, where I'm going to help people in underserved community in South America grow more food. And if you did that, just took seeds down there, you might work. But if you ask the people what seeds grow best in this soil, you might do more. And after watching and using it in a couple of environments like that myself, I said, what if we turn design thinking on ourselves and said, what is going on in here? And if I want to be, I'm one of 7 billion people on the planet, and I could have a black turtleneck on and black jeans and white Adidas shoes on, and I could do my best Steve Jobs impersonation. And it kind of look, black is elegant. I might look kind of handsome on the stage. I try to be, and I try to walk like Steve back and forth and make presentations like him, but I'm not Steve Jobs. When I do that human-centered design and turn that process on myself, because I'm trying to if I'm going to bring value to the world, I can say I'm going to sell pens. But there's a lot of pen sellers out there. How am I going to sell pens differently to make myself wildly successful? I use design thinking to say, okay, what is going on? Who are you? What do you got? Maybe I've got ink in my veins because my grandparents were printers, and I understand that process. When I ask myself those questions, and maybe I don't have ink in my veins, maybe it is that I'm just a good executive manager and I know how to build teams, and I could select the right people that then go and disrupt the pen marketplace. That's what is, what if, what wows, and what works internally. My creative self-disruption, bringing forward my true value. And in so doing, I will discover my own narrative. I will discover what narrative is the story that's fueling my way forward. Because that what is the general. This is Art Jones. This is what is. What if I think about what I did at Xerox and what I did at Document Sciences and what I did, when I played sports, or what I did when I talked to Tracy Goodwin and learned from her. All of my experience in aggregate is the what if. Mm-hmm. And I said, to fix that problem about pen selling, if I take these 5 things, these 4 things, and those are what wows. Oh my gosh, they're amazing. You own those things. You have internalized those things. You're good at those things. And then I take 2 of them, and those are the things that will be what works that I use to drive forward. In that exercise, what I'm thinking just about me, the founder, is my founding story, my origin story. Mm-hmm. And think about on TV in the last decade or more, how many CEOs have stepped on camera on commercials and wanted us to know who they are? We care about the authenticity of brands. We care about the humanizations of the brands we do business with. And if you're not telling the founding story of your brand, if you're not telling the origin story of your brand, if you're not, and that what is, what if, what wows, what works is your evolution story. If you're not able to tell that story, you're just a logo and you have product. And I'm trying to connect with you because I like you, but I don't know who you really are and how you help me. Founding story, origin story, evolution story are 3 stories that are central to a brand's humanization, embraceability. And until you do what is, what if, what wows, and what works on yourself, you might not have, you'll be making stories up, but are they genuinely your stories that come from that deep well inside of you? And that's the authenticity of the brand called you. I'm not sure if I even answered your question.
Oh, wow. It doesn't matter what the question was at this point. That was powerful. If we had cassette tapes, I'd wear that out with rewind. That was funny. Powerful. That's funny. You've been so inspirational to me. You don't know this, but just for the listeners, we've jumped on. Art has invited me on his show, and we've been on interviews and whatnot with each other. And I'm 50 years old, and my entire core of what I teach, the power behind it, is in the stories of my existence that I refused to share. You were very instrumental. I told the most vulnerable one the other day to a stranger on an interview, because what you helped me to see, and I say I never shared any of them. Of course, I shared lots of them. There's lots of pieces to every, like you say, the 3 stories. Yeah. But to have that power of knowing your place of greatest vulnerability, what you feel like is your greatest embarrassment or your greatest tragedy or your greatest failure, is what is going to connect the people to you because they relate on an emotional level. Whoa.
It's
That's
powerful.
Brand. It's powerful.
The thing about, humans are wired for story. We're just wired for story. We've been telling stories before we could write. Writing has only been around. We haven't had pens for very long, right? Cuneiform writing was pictures on little tablets. It was pictures that we had before and the pictures that ended up on those tablets were first drawn on cave walls. We have found ways to communicate through dance, through pictures, through song, that's how stories were handed down. And we could tell stories because stories are memorable and stories are repeatable. And before we could write, it was the grandfather that told the granddaughter that told and that's because we're wired for story. The thing about story that's really powerful is that science now tells us that story changes our biology. A sad story will bring hormones into our bloodstream, cortisol. A story that makes us feel empathetic, that calls us to action with empathy, will release oxytocin, the hormone called the moral molecule, into our bloodstream. If story can change the biology of humans, and we know, as a man thinketh, right? There's been great tomes that have been written about how we think is how we live our lives. If we're not telling ourselves the right narrative, it's like the operating system on my phone. When this operating system on the phone goes crazy, it doesn't work so well. When the operating system driving me, my narrative, my story, why I wake up in the morning, when I sit down to do what I do, why I do it, who I do it for, and knowing how they're changed after they get it. Those are the stories that guide my activity, that guide my day, that fuel my passion. If I got the wrong story, I'll make money, but will I make meaning in my life and the life of the people that I serve? And I think the planet is moving toward making meaning in large scale. There's still people that just want to 10x it, show me the money. That's all they care about. That's fine. That's not me. That's not my ideal prospect. My ideal prospect is somebody that says, "Oh, look, I'm ready to do the work because I care about me. I want my narrative. I want people to buy me. Sure, I sell pencils, but I want them to know why I make pens and pencils. I do it because I want to change the trajectory of their life with the most amazing pen or pencil they've ever seen. And let me tell you the story of how I built a team to make the best pen or pencil. That's and how we changed over time. As our customers changed, we changed. And that's the evolution story because we care about them." Sorry about that.
Well, and I think, my catchphrase, and of course I'm coming at it from a voice perspective, but I love that, for a long time I've said, do you want to tell stories or do you want to change lives?
Or do you want to make up stories or do you want the authentic stories? I think in you asked the question earlier, why do people not care about their ideal prospect why do people not do the work? One, because it takes time, and often we'll spend time figuring out Snapchat, but we won't spend time figuring out our intention. Mm-hmm. You know, Simon Sinek did a great TED talk that inspired us all. He wasn't the first person that said it, but he was the one that did it on TED, and we all got it. You know, why you do what you do. People don't buy what you do or how you do it. They buy why you do it, which is really a big idea. Taking the time to find your why, what your superpower is, what makes you remarkable. That's what is, what if, what wows, and what works. That what wows, you pick one. You might have 3 superpowers, but pick one, right? Mm-hmm. And nurture it. And then take the next one and nurture that. Now you've got 2. And then take the third one. You said you had 3. Bring it forward, nurture it. And now you are rocking and rolling. You are doing amazing things. And when you stand in that authority for those things that make you remarkable, that's when you'll stand out among the crowd, because there's nobody like you. We're mm-hmm. like fingerprints and snowflakes when we stand up for who we are and what we believe. And it's hard because, you know, sometimes people, it's easier just to go do. Mm-hmm. Right? So why is important, but I want to add to the why, because I challenge people that just want to find their why and then go do. Because and there's a book by Dove Simon, and I think it was a quote, not by Dove who wrote the book, but a quote from many centuries ago that says, how you do anything means everything. Mm. So Simon Sinek says people don't buy what you do or how you do it. They buy why you do it. And he uses the neurology to drive that conversation. Dove Seidman says how you do anything means everything. So it's a second tier of importance that we should consider. And how you do anything, if I'm selling pencils and pens, I can build the best pen. But if I don't know who my audience is, right? I only make purple pens, and I make purple pens that have this little cushy thing for tablets on the bottom. And I only sell the people that it's crazy about purple. They're crazy about purple because I know this about people that like purple. I know their narrative. And that's getting into the how. I'm doing it because I'm in service to them. And how I bring this pen to them matters. How I tell the story about the value of this pen matters. So how you do anything means everything to the audience that you serve. Mm-hmm. So why is important? How is important? And one day I'll probably decide that what is important as well.
That's so awesome. It's so awesome. We've had a question, and I would love to hear what you have to say about this. What is now, and of course, you know, storytelling is your thing, and I'll definitely have to have you back on, because there's so many golden nuggets. You know, you can't pack it all in one session. But what's the most important lessons you've learned about yourself by writing and telling stories?
Oh, wow. I learned what my superpower was. And I think this is how it happens. And it happened for me. And my evolution story is telling stories. So I was in a storytelling class, and the first exercise was to go out somewhere on a walk, on a bike ride, and just listen to what's going on, and then come back and tell the story of it. I was like, really? Are you sure? Okay, I'll do that. It was a Stanford online class that I took. And I walked on a bike trail not far from me, and I just went walking along the bike trail. And I started tuning into, the sound of bikes going by and people running, the footfalls that I heard. Off in the distance, I would hear a siren from a distant fire truck. And the tapestry of sound that I'd never really taken the time to listen to. I was kind of in a mindful state. I let all that noise that I used to hear as just static rise up as the sounds that were really happening around me. When I came back and sat down and wrote the story, I was like, wow, That was an amazing walk. There was a lot going on out there. And it was a compelling story about my experience in that, short walk of about a half a mile, what I discovered about the world around me. Then another exercise in another class was, tell me your life story. It's like, my life story? Really? I've never told anybody a life story. And what it was seeking to help us do was to help us find that thing inside of us that when our first recognition that the thing I embrace today about me is that I listen. I can talk a mile a minute and just not stop. But when I'm listening, I ask thoughtful questions and insightful questions that get you to do the talking. And the question elicits from you the answer to your own question. That's what I do. And it's a sense of inquiry and a sense of wonder I have about people and things that I've had since I was probably 3 years old. And there's a story about that I can tell, that when I'm looking for the genesis of that inquiry and wonder, it's a family story my mother and father would tell about me as a youth. As you fast forward, I go to my days in the enterprise in working with customers. It was always that thoughtful and insightful and compelling question I would ask that I was trained to do as a salesperson of technology, to let the customer do all the talking, not to guide the conversation, but to help them hear themselves say, this is my implied need. I need to improve the processes of my accounts receivable. The explicit need was, if I do that, I can add more people, and we're growing. We have to add more people because we want to merge with this some other thing like that was the explicit need. And nobody ever buys because you found the implied need. They buy because you are having a conversation and a collaboration to co-create solutions around the explicit need they have. And that's what salespeople should be doing, not simply saying, well, look, I've got software and it comes in gold or purple. Which one do you want? Mm-hmm. That's how a lot of selling is done. My skill, and each of us has skills like this. And let me get back to answering your question. And it is, I discovered my strength not by doing what is, what if, what wows, and what works. That would be wonderful. I did it by listening to what people were telling me. There's a customer had hired me as a consultant, emerging fashion brand in New York. I'm from New Jersey. I'd been living in California for a long time. I came back to New York for a couple of years, and this was a client. And we had great fun together. We really were a great team. And they said, you need to come to this meeting with us. What meeting? Well, it's a meeting with Diesel and Bergdorf. And having been in a little fashion for a while, I was like, those are big deal. Bergdorf Goodwin, really, me? Yeah. Come, you need to be there. Okay. I went to the meeting, and there's Bergdorf EVP sat here. My colleague, a woman who had been in fashion for 30 years, sat to my left, and I sat to her right, and Diesel and the other people sat on the other side of the table. The meeting went on for about 90 minutes, and I said one simple thing. At the end of the meeting, everybody's leaving. I'm sitting there, glad that it's over, and my colleague says something to the Bergdorf woman. The Bergdorf woman replies, and everybody's gone, just my colleague, the woman to my left, and myself. And she says, you'll be happy to know that we're going to win the business. I said, really? That's great. But you should also know that the Bergdorf woman says that we're going to give you the business because she thought you were the creative director for the brand. Really?
Wow.
And it was the one thing that I said. And so I stepped into the room insecure and out of my element. I'm a technologist, for goodness sake, right? But there I was. And people see in you things you don't see in yourself. And when you begin to embrace them, that's when you can stand in your authority. So when you listen to what people say, and for years prior to that, I'd rejected the notion, kind of like, oh yeah, that's nice, thanks. And I keep moving. I didn't think I needed it or wanted it. I was a technology salesperson. You're telling me that I have this other thing that I was consciously unconscious of, right? I just used it, but I wasn't conscious of it. That person made me conscious of it. In another meeting, there was a brilliant person from the London School of Economics, and they'd gone to Wharton. They grew up in Morocco. They were like, and they hired me. I was like, wow, I'm impressed with myself. They hired me. They hired me to help them. They had a business. They left the business with half the business, and they were founding a new business. And an executive coach told them to hire me. And this was also on the East Coast. And I was like, wow, flattered. And we met for several times. We're sitting in the corner office. He's drawing on the whiteboard. And I stopped him. I said, we've been meeting for a long time, and I always am in awe of what you do on the whiteboard. It's just amazing how you capture such vivid pictures and such great structure of the conversations we're having and where you're trying to go and how you're going to get there. And he said, Art, he turned around, he looked at me and said, that's why I hired you and I pay you to sit here and have these conversations with me, because I can't do it without you here. And again, I was like, really? And so people were saying to me, look, dude, step into your authority. This is what you're good at. This is what you do. I knew I was a technology salesperson and sold $1 million of stuff and could do that on a consistent and regular basis. But this interacting with people and bringing out of them without doing an awful lot, but bringing it out of them and drawing it out of them and then giving it back to them. And often it would simply be, so what did I do? I said, well, you said a half an hour ago, blah, blah, blah. And I said, that's brilliant. And that's exactly what I should do. And I would smile and say, well, you said that a half an hour ago. But it's things that it's just like me. I never heard myself in the role of creative director. I never heard myself in the role of muse almost with the Wharton and London School of Economics person that said, I can't do this without you in the room. And it goes back to that 3-year-old child that my parents talk about, having a sense of awe and inquiry and wonder that allows me to draw those things out. But until we stand in that authority and are able to tell those stories, and this story is not for you as much as it is the narrative that informs me of my strength, that makes me do the work that I do. Because absent those stories, I'd still be saying, no, in the meeting with Bergdorf and Diesel, I'm not so sure. Now I am. Now I have no reservation, because the programming driving me forward is aligned with the mission that I am on. Sorry for another long answer, but
boom, that's it right there. That's it right there. And, I certainly had to discover that myself, and embrace all of those stories. Like I was saying earlier, embrace those stories that I would think people would be, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And that is the story that resonated with them to success, to find that nugget within themselves. It's so crucial and so powerful and so empowering. And what an incredible journey. I'm going to ask one more question, because You've said this word a couple of times, and I love it. And it's a big part of what I teach, and that is listening. It sounds like a huge part of the success and golden nugget mastery that you are revealing today is about listening.
I say it this way. I mean, back in the days when I was a junior salesperson at Xerox Corporation, one of the paramount trainers of sales skills, the first skill I learned was effective listening. And then I learned the questioning techniques that would elicit talking from the person you were engaged with. And listening is, you can't listen if we just sit here quietly, there's nothing to listen to. But if I say, well, Tracy, that's interesting, tell me more about that. Then you talk for 5 minutes and I listen. And if I say, tell me more about this notion of pacing in speaking from the podium, and then you'll talk about pacing. I'm leading the conversation, and I answer that question this way today. I wouldn't have 25 years ago when I first learned the skill, but I answer it this way, and I answer it with an Einstein quote. because social proof, if you're going to use social proof, why not use Einstein? He said that if you have a difficult problem to solve and only 60 minutes to solve the problem, take the first 55 minutes to think of the right question to ask. And then it will only take you 5 minutes to solve the problem. And that really, for me, is what listening is all about. And if I was going to use listening, I'm auditioning for a TED Talk here in Arizona on the 30th. If I know who the audience is that I want to reach, that empathy that I have for them, right? That knowing I have for them, right? It's like knowing everybody in the audience is over 50. I'm going to use a 36-point font on that one slide that I've got so people in the back of the room can see it, right? Mm-hmm. If they're young people, it doesn't matter, right? And so if you know who your audience is, and that knowing, that empathy that I have for them is listening in a different kind of way. It's not using my ears as much as I'm using my sense of empathy that I'm nurturing, because when I go to the podium, in preparation to go to the podium, I have to listen and I have to seek to understand who my audience is, what they need, and what they'll benefit most from. And how to take the value of my story that I want to tell and insert it directly into their narrative. If I don't know them, I'm not inserting anything into their narrative because I don't know what it is for them. So listening is that kind of work, that ask a thoughtful, insightful, and compelling question, then you do all the talking. Now I'm listening to your response to the insightful question I asked. I asked that question because I wanted to elicit the way you feel and think about, much like you're doing during this conversation. You've asked me that question about vulnerability was like, whoa. But it made me dig deep to find out how I wanted to, it makes me discover something about myself that perhaps I didn't know was there. Mm-hmm. And each of us has the same opportunity. So effective listening is less about this and more about the intellectualization, the thoughtful, patient thinking of what question should I ask. Because I'm prepared to listen, but I have to think of what question do I want to ask them to find out what I need to know about them so I can understand them better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. It's a difference in hearing versus listening.
Yeah, if you listen, there's a I can't remember what the saying is. It's kind of clever, and it if you listen really well, it's I can't remember it, but it has a lot to do with showing the power of hearing, and I think when you say that's true, but in a conversation, it stops the flow of the conversation. The but is like a stop sign. But when you say that's true, and it allows the conversation to flow like a river, it's just babbling over the little rocks. It doesn't stop. And that's what you want the person that you're seeking to understand to do. You don't want to stop or interrupt the flow of what they're talking about, because there's gold in that. If you're just trying to be their friend, just let them ask them thoughtful questions and let them talk and listen. Yeah. If you're trying to help, if you're trying to collaborate with them to co-create solutions, ask the thoughtful, insightful questions about what their mission is, and you'll discover, how to collaborate and what to co-create. So the questions precede every listening moment. Yeah.
Wow. I tell you what, you are something else. You are just something else. What a treasure.
And Tracy, I say the exact same thing about you when I'm doing the interviewing, because I am in awe of the way you think about, how we use this instrument, this organ, our voice. And I think storytelling changes our biology, right? And, I've heard somebody say that if you want to be more creative and you're right-handed, draw a picture with your left hand, see what comes out, right? Because it's the mechanical exercise. storytelling, that you use this organ to tell the story. When you treat this organ like a flute or a guitar or a bass fiddle that has a tone and a clarity and like there's a metronome, and you know what the pacing is and how to. And you've taught me some things about that, and I think some things I may have unconsciously known, but when you become conscious of them, you become more attuned with the impact that it can have, because when you pause, the next thing you say has more power. And you make those things so clear. And when you marry, you and I sitting in squares together, storytelling, and we both do storytelling. When you marry the pacing and the tone and the pitch with the compelling story, that's where the magic lives. And that's why I so enjoy having these conversations with you and learning from you.
Yeah. Well, the feeling is absolutely mutual. And, it's true. The voice is, there's a comment very similar to another one of my catchphrases, the voice is the orchestra of the heart.
That's beautiful, Barbara. Yeah.
The eyes are the windows to the soul, but the voice is the orchestra of the heart. And you don't want to play a one-note band.
There's somebody, Nicole Levac, who's here on Blab, and she's all about all about nature. She's writing a book about nature as a metaphor for living. She posted something I had been looking for, and she posted it this morning on Facebook, and it was a neurologists have studied musicians and how musicians, when we listen to music, certain areas of our brain light up. Certain areas of our brain light up when we listen to music. When we play music, it's like a symphony, right? Mm-hmm. And if we think about what Barbara and you just said, our voice is attached to our heart, and our voice is an instrument like a cello or like a saxophone or a flute. When we use this instrument in that way, we ignite different parts of our brain. When we're mindfully using it to make sounds that we are seeking to engage an audience with, it's not different, I don't think, than using a guitar to make sounds to engage an audience. Because when we're mindful of how to use it, and story changes our biology. And I knew that musicians are wired a little differently. That's why parents encourage their children to play violin, at the young age, because it wires your brain differently. Einstein said he downloaded the theory of relativity as he was playing the violin. He was a virtuoso violinist. If this is an instrument like those musical instruments, then we should really treat it like an instrument that makes music to the ears of the audience that we're trying to reach. Because when we do know what you know, Tracy, it can be music to their ears, because it's not just so quiet that you have to try hard to hear me. And it's not that I'm not unsure. I stand tall and I speak with authority, and then I pause before I say, boom, right? And that's musical, and it changes us, and it's received in the audience in the very same way, and it changes them with how we use that instrument of the voice and how we use the compelling stories that we want to tell. Mm-hmm. So thank you for making me smarter about that.
Well, it was my honor and privilege. So Art, tell us where we can find you. Tell the people where they can find you.
I'm on a hashtag. You'll find all of my stuff that I've been using for not too long, but long enough to be found. And the hashtag is #TAOSO, which is the acronym for the art of standing out. You can find me at Art Jones most everywhere, because being a technologist and being involved in social media early on, I kind of grabbed the name Art Jones and realized that there are a lot of me out there, a lot of Art Joneses out there. But if you find an Art Jones that's 6'6" and played football at Syracuse University and won a Super Bowl in the Indianapolis Colts, that's not me. The other Art Jones that you'll find in the fabric of the World Wide Web. So hashtag the TAOSO. And you put TAO, the Tao, the art of, in front of Art Jones, you'll find me there as well, because it's funny that the art of was a clever name for my business, the art of social media, the art of marketing, the art of storytelling. When I shortened it, the TAO became the Tao. And the Tao is not my invention. It's the Chinese philosophy of alignment and harmony. And everything I do is about helping businesses and business professionals find alignment and harmony in themselves first, so they can then find their business in alignment with the audience that they serve. So put TAO in front of Art Jones, you'll find me there too.
Well, that's great. And you no doubt stand out. And I just encourage everyone to follow you and look you up and cherish the golden nuggets that you so freely share to all of us. You are definitely a human being that makes the world a better place. And
Thank
I am
you, Tracy. Thank you.
No doubt honored to know you and get to share this valuable time with you. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.